Microdose, yeah. Microdose, 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 dose. Microdose, microdose, dose. Microdose, microdose, dose.
What's good, y'all? Kush Hayes here. Episode 155 of the Microdose. We are, as usual, one of my favorite times of the year. And maybe I just like having events to look forward to. Who knows? But Oscars So 95 is right around the corner here this Sunday, the 95th Academy Awards. It's March 12th. Jimmy Kimmel is the host for his third time. It's on ABC as usual. And joining me, the funniest man in the room, the CEO of Angelcake Entertainment, Drew Angelman. What's good, man? Happy Oscars weekend.
Yes, happy Oscars weekend. I'm excited to talk about these Oscar movies now that I've seen pretty much all the Best Picture nominees. And I feel a little bit more prepared since the last time we talked about them and the predictions. So I'm ready to get into these movies and talk about them.
Before we get into all that, though, you remember this time last year, you and I were doing what we're going to do tonight. We're going over the Best Pictures, and we're like, yeah, I mean, these are all pretty good movies, but it feels like it's going to be just another boring. You think anything interesting is going to happen this year? And you and I were both like, nah, it's just going to be another boring, dull Oscars. Sure enough, 72 hours later, the slap heard around the world. And from the February 23rd article of Vanity Fair, the Academy of Motion Arts and Sciences has hired a crisis team to stop any Oscar slaps in their tracks. I'm not going to go into the entire article here, but we have a whole crisis team, something we've never had before, and many plans in place. Bill Kramer, CEO of the Academy, told Time Magazine, "We've run many scenarios, so it is our hope that we'll be prepared for anything that we may not anticipate right now, but that we are planning for it just in case this happens." Drew Angelman, the odds of another assault on the biggest stage of the year is highly unlikely. But what do you think, if anything, the crisis response team might have to face this year?
They're going to have to face some rowdy actors and actresses that have been sitting for too long and drinking too much. I think that Steven Spielberg might have one too many and go into a rendition of West Side Story, forgetting that he did that last year, not this year. So they're going to have to really hone him in.
Oh my God. I think we might see James Cameron win the Academy Award for Best Picture for Avatar 2, and this infuriates Steven Spielberg so much that he has a little false tooth in the back of his jaw that he pops out and he spits on the floor. And sure enough, his ultimate plan, his ultimate concoction. This is also a response to how bad Jurassic World Dominion did this year, and he's just. He has taken the DNA of Jada Pinkett, cloned it with a dinosaur, and he's unleashed the first Alopecia upon the audience of the Academy Award. I think that's what the crisis team might have in store for them.
That'd be exciting.
That bombed so hard. You were very kind.
I'll be honest. I mean, if they're trying to up one level of the slap, I mean, they're gonna have to do something big if they're really wanting it to be exciting. Because I know it's not the best publicity that the Academy could get, but it's more people talking about the Academy than in recent years, I would think. I mean, besides the Moonlight and La La Land switch up with Best Picture, I mean, everything else has been kind of just status quo for the Oscars until the slap. So they're going to have to come in with something big, I think, this year if they want to gain that audience attention again. But we'll see.
We'll see. Let's get into this. Best Pictures. At the top of the list here, and I guess this is an alphabetical order on my list, Netflix's All Quiet on the Western Front, a movie about the Great War, what we now know as World War I, told from the story of a young German boy who's way in over his head and just changes within the matter of minutes. I was not impressed with this. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It was honestly, it's hard to be sympathetic for these characters in my mind. Yeah, that's about all I got to say about that. But All Quiet on the, were you blown away by the special effects? Did you relate to the story at all? Like, what say you, Drew Angelman? What did you think of All Quiet on the Western Front, Netflix's contribution to the Academy this year?
So I got back on Letterboxd and I started actually going through movies because I haven't really kept up with it. And I too gave All Quiet on the Western Front 3 stars. I think the cinematography was fine. I think it could actually win for best cinematography. But I mean, how many like war movies have been nominated for Oscars? And I think that there have been some that are way better in past years, and we've had them back to back to back in so many different years that it's hard not to compare them and be like, okay, well, this is up for best picture, but 1917 was a better Oscar picture, but it didn't win. I don't think it won the year, but it's like, it's hard to think that way. But I do think that 1917 was a better war movie. And I don't think that this one stacks up compared to that one or some of the movies that are also nominated. I didn't even know this movie existed until it was nominated. Right. And I looked it up and it was on Netflix, which it's not great. I mean, I liked Roma better as an Oscar movie. I think Power of the Dog was their ticket into being Oscar winning last year, and it fell flat. I think this one just falls flat as well. Like you said, the people that it follows it wasn't something that I was like rooting for them or that gripped with the story. I was just like, oh, it's another war movie.
Yeah,
all right,
another war movie. Very paint by the numbers.
Yeah.
You know, the kids all think this is a big laugh, and then sure enough, like one of their buddies just explodes in front of them. They're like, oh shit, war is real. Like, oh, we've made a terrible mistake here. You know, nothing was surprising, nothing was shocking. I actually kind of appreciated the movie's intro where we see like, you know, like we are following this one kid, but we're not following this kid. We're actually following his uniform. And once he gets murked immediately, like you see the process of like they recollect the uniform, they find the bullet holes, they restitch that up, they clean it up, and then they give it to the next victim. And sure enough, he's like, "Hey, this isn't my name." He's like, "Oh, this must have been just too small," and tosses the happens all the time, kid. Don't worry.
It didn't. Like you said, it didn't do anything new. It didn't add anything to the zeitgeist or into the talk or try to do something different. I guess the uniform thing was different. I think also following German soldiers or German kids through this was different, but we've seen everything that it showed to us in multiple movies, but they just collected all the scenes and then put them in one. And I wasn't surprised or excited about this movie at all. Also, it's funny that it's like, oh, they found out that it was a mistake right away, but then the movie's like over 2 hours long, and so you're just sitting there going like, yep, we get it. Yep, keep going. Let's get to it. All right.
Oh my, yeah, it just keeps going and going, and then there's the whole subplot where Daniel Bruhl, aka Count Baron Zemo, he's like he's just collecting names, just like, hey guys, like we're like really losing this war. This is a bad luck. Germany is very small. We're going up against Russia. Okay, Russia. Like,
yeah,
our number is 8-1. Anyway,
well, and also it's very predictable in the way that I was like, all right, everybody's going to die, right? Just get to it. You know, at a certain point, I was like, there's no way they're going to live through this. And spoiler alert, they don't. So it's like, let's just get to that end. But it takes 2.5 hours to get there. And I don't know. It just kind of shows the pointlessness of war as well as this movie in some senses, with that being the case. So I'm just like, whatever.
If anything, my biggest disappointment of this movie is actually just this one plot point where 18 months has passed. They're very accustomed to this life now of just war and death and murder and just cold and hunger. And anyway, a couple French girls are walking in the field, and one of the guys just like goes, "Oh, French girls, eh?" And just puts on his best coat and straightens his hair up and just starts laying down his best rap. And then he's like, "Au revoir, friends. I'm gonna go be a farmer now." And I was like, All right, yeah, good for him. Like, you can just walk away anytime. All right, but then like 20 minutes later, he's back in the bunker, and I was like, oh, why'd you do that, man? No one would have known. No one would have known you were gone. You would have been fine.
Yeah.
Oh. Avatar 2. Avatar: The Way of Water. This is a movie that you have not seen. It's 13 years to get this far, and I think to fall just so short. Again, this is a very, very pretty movie. Like, if you like visuals, if you're like me and your name is Kush Hayes and you smoke a lot of weed, like, this is a very good looking movie. However, it is 3 hours long and just kind of dull. It's James Cameron, so all the good action is there. You are invested in these characters, especially now that this is a sequel, but it does not do anything for me. I'm honestly surprised this wasn't nominated for a best animated film, despite that there are some live action characters in it. This movie actually like swept the Annies, which is the animation awards. I forget who the governing body of that is, but yeah, Avatar 2 won like 9 Annies, all for best animated this, best animated that, best et cetera, et cetera. So, movie has made nearly $2 billion, gone over $2 billion, on its way to eclipse its predecessor. If you haven't seen it, you're probably not going to, but I would recommend everyone that likes a good visual go see this on the biggest screen possible. And then don't worry about it till Avatar 3.
I think this Avatar 2, I'm looking at it kind of like Dune. Now, I did watch Dune before the Oscars last year, but it was because it was on HBO Max, and we were also still getting over the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything. So I was able to watch Dune. I actually really liked Dune, even though I watched it on my TV/iPad. I thought it was still really, really good, even though I didn't see it on the biggest screen ever. And I would have actually given this movie a chance if it was on a streaming service before the Oscars, but because it came out in December, it's still trying to get as much money as they can. That was just not going to happen, and I'm going to actively boycott this movie for being over 3 hours long, and I don't want to sit in a movie theater for that long. I also don't think that this movie, when it was announced, was going to have a shot at Best Picture. I think it's going to act like Dune and get all the technical awards, as it should. I mean, it's breaking barriers in CGI and, as you were saying, animation, but I just didn't want to invest 3.5 hours on a weekday in the middle of one of my work days to go see this movie when I don't think it's gonna be able to step up against some of these movies that are also listed. But I do think that it could get all the technical awards, as it should, in my opinion. But yeah, that's the only one I haven't seen, so I'll gladly wear that badge or take that loss, not seeing one of the Oscar Best Picture nominees.
Yeah, I think we'll allow it this time. We'll give you a little asterisk, but it's a tiny asterisk. It's this big. You can't see it. You can barely see it. The Banshees of Inisherin, which I'm still surprised does not take place in Japan. I don't know why I'm hung up on that, but I am. It is available on HBO Max, and I had not heard of this film before the Academy list was announced. As I think I mentioned the last time you were on the show, like, a buddy of mine just texted me. I was like, saw the Banshees of Inisherin, made me think of you. Love you, homie. And I was like, okay, I love you too. And then I watched it and I was like obviously this is a person that I had a falling out with once upon a time. We have since made amends. We're all good and broy now. But like, I'm watching this like, well, I can't be Colin Farrell, but I'm also not a guy who would just mutilate himself to make a point to say, leave me alone. Like, I can just block numbers, or I can move to the other side of the island. Like, it's not a big deal. So I don't know what exactly this movie reminded my friend of, but it's fine. I would like to give it a higher score, but I can only give it a 3 out of 5. Colin Farrell, when has he ever bad in anything? It ain't in this. He ain't bad in this. The other gentleman, Brendan Gleeson. Brendan Gleeson's fine. This is the guy who keeps cutting off his fingers. Barry Keoghan, also up for Best Supporting Actor. He's just weird in everything, but this is probably the best thing he's been weird in, maybe. I don't know. It's what did you think of Banshees of Inisherin?
I liked this movie. I thought it was very charming. I liked how simplistic it was. It was just these two guys in their friendship, and then also the inner workings of the relationship of the brother and sister, and the war, again, another war background. War is happening in the background of this movie. It's funny that you talked about your friend messaging you. I did the same thing. I thought of an ex podcast host that I used to do for the movies, and we used to have this like fun banter personality thing where he would always get annoyed with a lot of the things I said, and it was kind of like a character arc. I mean, he didn't really hate me. We would talk about all these different things too, but during the live air, we would always have these bits where I was the new guy to the podcast and he would get annoyed with me. And so I thought of myself as Colin Farrell, being kind of like naive and kind of simple. And then he was Brandon Gleeson, who's like, get away from me. You're annoying. You're annoying me. So I kind of wrote him and been like, I just saw Banshees of Inisherin and it reminded me of us. So he was like, all right. So, and I was like, yeah, you're the one cutting off your fingers. But I thought this was a charming movie. I'll be honest, when the first finger came off, I was shocked. I didn't think he was going to do it. I don't know. The ending kind of left me like, all right. Like, I didn't feel like it was such a profound movie. I just thought it was charming. It was way funnier than I thought it was going to be. I do like it. I can see some of the Academy voting for this movie. I just don't think it has that broad appeal that it's going to overtake some of the other competitors that I think could win or in a better shot of winning this. I do think that Colin Farrell could win, or even the weird guy. I can't remember his name.
Brandon Keogh. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he could win something. He was definitely a huge person in this as well. So, but yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Out of all of these movies, it ranks higher. I would give it like a 3.5 to 4. I think I gave it 3.5 on Letterboxd, so I'm gonna say 3.5.
There you go. I think one thing the Crisis team might have to respond to. Dig this: Best Picture nominee, Everything Everywhere All at Once, is celebrating its Best Picture win right now. Producers are up there giving a speech, and then, much like out of Family Guy with the Peter and the chicken fight, Vladimir Putin and President Zelensky, dressed as Paddington, all of a sudden just come tumbling out from backstage and are in fisticuffs. They're just beating the shit out of each other. Just, it's like scene out of Rocky. It's all haymakers, and they're all connecting, and each one's left to right, right to left, right to left, and then something happens, and Vladimir Putin accidentally kills Ke Huy Quan. America's sweetheart Ke Huy Quan is dying there in Michelle Yeoh's arms, and she's crying, and those tears are spilling onto her Best Actress award, and all of a sudden she gets up and performs a hurricanrana, much like you've seen Scarlett Johansson do in the Avengers, and break Vladimir Putin's neck, and that's how the Oscars ends this year. I don't know how the Crisis team responds to that, but that's got to be on their plate. Anything could happen.
I'm not gonna lie. When you started, I thought you were gonna say something to the effect of like Everything Everywhere All at Once, and the Daniels were up there to accept the award, giving speech, and like Tom Cruise just comes walking up to the stage and starts throwing his mutilated fingers at the Daniels because he wanted Top Gun Maverick to win, and he hated that movie, so he just like throws all of his fingers up there, telling everybody to leave him alone.
Tom, you still have to film Mission Impossible 8. You can't be cutting off your fingers, man. Like, I know you think you're invincible, but dude, also, just what the hell, Tom? Tom Cruise, everybody. Tom Cruise. Up next, Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. You know what? This is also, just like Avatar, it's a very pretty film. It's also just under 3 hours, but for as long as it is, my complaint about it is Elvis Presley's life was so complicated. This movie could have actually been longer. And if it was going to be longer, maybe it should have just been like an HBO series, a mini series, because like there's all sorts of key things missing. I know it's being told from the point of view of Tom Hanks is the Colonel character, but like, you know, big details are missing from Elvis's life. Like, I would love to see the episode where Elvis learns karate. It could be 5 minutes. I don't care. But like, this man's life was super complicated. Like, he was a star all over the world and never left the continental United States. It's pretty crazy. But I gave so far this is my highest review. 4 out of 5 is what I gave Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. I tried to watch it on HBO Max a few months ago. I only got about halfway through, but I enjoyed my initial viewing.
So we're on the kind of opposite of this because
Oh,
I gave it like a 2. I was not. Oh, I wasn't excited about this movie. I didn't like the runtime going into it. Like you said, Elvis was a very complex person. I mean, he's a person that a lot of us know at least by name, if we know some songs. I mean, this is a well-known figure, and the way they handled his life, they glossed over so much. And to have this person who was
speed through it.
so interesting, they could have made a way more they could have way more messages in this. They could have had a lot more entertainment, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
this. And what we got, I felt was kind of underwhelming in a sense. I do think, now I'll be honest, coming into this, when we first recorded our predictions, I thought that Brendan Fraser was going to run away with the best actor nom. I actually
Mm-hmm.
think that the win for best leading actor, I mean, he's keeping up the Elvis voice. Yeah, we had Lisa Marie Presley, I think, pass away pretty recently,
Just
and
recently.
he did a great job. I will say that Austin Butler did a great job in this movie, to the point where
Mm-hmm.
I do think that he could be the front runner going into the night. But overall, with this movie, I was just very underwhelmed with it. I was hoping for more. I was excited for this movie, and then what we got was just kind of underwhelming in a lot of the sense.
Okay. I think that's fair. I think that's all fair. One of the reoccurring issues I kept hearing people criticize Elvis about was Tom Hanks' performance. I didn't have a problem with that. Everyone kept going, "What is that accent? What is that accent?" And before I explained what that accent was, did you have the same issue, Drew? Like you're like, "The fuck is Tom Hanks doing?"
I think I like Tom Hanks in it. I
Mm-hmm.
personally would have rather it get a little bit more into, like, he could have started out the movie and then just completely take over with Austin Butler, because like I said, he was, I think, the strongest point of this movie. He really
Mm-hmm.
delved into the character. I mean, he's still doing the voice.
Mm-hmm.
But having Tom Hanks kind of like breaking the fourth wall and be like almost like a cartoon character at some points of this movie,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it kind of took me out
Interesting.
of the events a little bit too much.
Okay.
But that's the choice they decided to make, and at least it was a narrative choice and a stylized
Mm-hmm.
choice, rather
Yeah.
than it just being like cookie cutter or like a Bohemian Rhapsody, which was just like weird in some areas.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's all narrative. He's the narrator of Elvis's story here. It's his story about Elvis. And again, a lot of people are like, "What is this accent?" And it's revealed in the movie that Colonel Tom Parker is actually just a Dutch immigrant on the run from authorities back in his homeland. So he disappeared in America during a time where you could just easily disappear, decide he's going to become a Southern gentleman. So he's trying to perform a Southern accent through a very heavy Dutch accent. It's one of the most genius performances I think
Mm-hmm.
I've ever seen. Again, surprised nobody else picked up on that. In fact, like his name isn't Tom Parker. He was never a colonel. I knew of the Colonel Tom Parker, but I was like, well, it must be like some sort of Southern gentleman thing, like Colonel Sanders or something. Like I don't know that Colonel Sanders was ever in a war either. But you call him the Colonel because that's his name. And to find out, it's like, no, just the Colonel sounded like an important person. So that's the persona I took. I was like, fuck yeah, I love that. So we're gonna move on to the front runner. This is the one that everyone is talking about. It's got the most nominations of any of the movies that we're talking about today. It's a heavy favorite to take almost, if not all, the awards, and that's Everything Everywhere All at Once by the Daniels. Again, Michelle Yeoh, Ke Huy Quan, James Hong, Stephanie Hsu, Jamie Lee Curtis. Like this is a powerhouse performance. And before we got to Doctor Strange 2, this was kind of the casual moviegoer's introduction to the whole multiverse theory. Um, I like how it looks. I like that they tried to visit as many multiverses as they could and make things look as different as they could. Again, at one point, Stephanie Shu is dressed like Elvis, and just for no reason, confetti is falling from the sky as she's just murdering people with just her fingers. She didn't even have a weapon. She just points a finger and someone's head explodes. However, having said that, I remember feeling just like it's a little overrated, even though it just came out that March. I get it. I like it. It's not my favorite. I gave it a 3 out of 5 here. Again, I went and revisited it this previous weekend, and I stand by that. It's long and it drags, and it could have been better. Sure, everything could be better, but I don't have any notes of what would have made it better. I've seen it twice now, and I'm still confused by the ending. How did we resolve this conflict? It's still unclear to me. But Angelman, what did you think of everything, everywhere, all at once?
I love it. I like it a lot. I saw it twice in theaters. I even tried to watch it once at home, but I had to do something halfway through it, so I never went back to revisit it. But I actually went and saw it once in theaters. Then, 2 weeks later, my friend was like, "We should go see a movie," and I was like, "Yeah, what do you want to go see?" And she had no idea, and I just said, "Let's go watch Everything Everywhere all at once." Now, she hates when I go see a movie with her that I've already seen. Because I go see a lot of movies. She does not see a lot of movies. But I didn't say anything about this movie. We went and saw it, and then I revealed that I had seen it, but I wanted to see it again. And it was great. I mean, I like it. I like how weird it is. I like how original it is. I will say, going into it, it was fighting an uphill battle with me because of everything that we're getting from the MCU at that time. Loki, the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, the Far From Home. No, not Far From Home. No Way Home. Was all about the multiverse. So I mean, that was in the zeitgeist. That was in a huge talking point. It's almost like a buzzword now, is the multiverse, or all these different branches and everything. So I went into it going all right, everybody's saying this is great. This is about a multiverse movie. I just didn't want. I was already getting tired of it in the MCU, and then getting it from a completely unknown IP. I was like, please, I just don't want it. I don't want this to be a new thing where how zombies were a thing or vampires were the thing for a couple of years. Right. I did not want a billion multiverse movies to be started coming out. And I actually thought that they did a really fantastic job with this movie. It has heart, unlike what we got from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It had a story. It was heartwarming. There was points where I cried at both viewings that I went to. I just really enjoyed this movie, and then I liked it more once I heard the director's roundtable with one of the Daniels, and hearing some of the backstory of the script and why he wrote this movie, and that the mom in the movie kind of is resemblance of his mom, and some of the stuff that they've gone through. So I just thought that this was a really, really good movie. And if this wins, which I'm really hoping it does, if this wins, this is one of those movies where I had no idea at the time that I was watching it that it would get to this point. It would get a nomination. It would have the most nominations and have a chance of winning. I mean, it's a movie that doesn't feel like an Oscar movie when comparison to past movies or past Oscar movies. But maybe we're getting into a new era where it's going to be harder to differentiate what is a quote unquote Oscar movie comparative to what we have gotten through the past couple of years of the Oscars, or how it has been throughout the years. So,
I mean, I'll definitely give it up. This is the most unique movie of these 10 that we're looking at here. And yeah, it has emotional events where rocks. I'm crying about rocks. I'm literally crying over 2 rocks. They don't even have voices. They're just this was a very well done movie. I love the story about how it was produced. This is one of those movies where the last day of principal photography, the world went on lockdown on its last day. So everything post-production wise was just done in the Daniels apartments. They're just sweating over their laptops trying to figure out how to do these special effects themselves. I find all of that fascinating. And for their very first time, yeah, man, hats off. They put out a very good picture. This came out in March last year, so that's also another surprise. Like normally
Wow.
when we talk about a movie that's on this list, it's comes out somewhere between September and December. It's almost never that far back. Like we just had the Oscars, 94th Oscars, and then this came out. So the fact that it's nominated for the 95th Oscars is it's pretty special. So and again, it's nominated for everything. It's got 11 nominations, the most nominations of this ceremony. And again, best actor is Ki Hu Kwan. Excuse me, he's the supporting actor. You got best directors of the Daniels. You got Michelle Yeoh is the best actress. You got the best supporting actress with not only but Stephanie Shu, but Jamie Lee Curtis. Like one of those ladies is going home with the Oscar. I don't think it's going to Angela Bassett. I don't think it's going to Miss Hong Chow or whoever Carrie Condon is. Like this Ki Hu Kwan seems to be sweeping every award show he's been nominated at. Like I don't think it's been an
Yeah.
issue. Like I 100% see Short Round taking the little gold trophy this weekend. So everything, everywhere, all at once. I gave it a 3. What did you give it? Did you give it a 5?
I gave it a 5. Yeah.
Outstanding. Steven Spielberg's The Fabelmans, a loosely adaptation of Mr. Spielberg's growing up. He's got that perfect suburban family, but they're Jewish, and it's just after World War II or just before Vietnam. I'm not sure where they are, but And long story short, Seth Rogen cucks Steven Spielberg's dad. However, this movie is definitely charming. It's got a lot of good performances in it. Paul Dano against Seth Rogen. Michelle Williams plays the mom. I don't know who the boys are that play Steven Spielberg or his sisters, but they're fine. My biggest problem with the Fabelmans is, it is over 2 hours, and then it just ends. It doesn't have an ending. It just kind of ends, and you figure, yeah, okay, this kid's gonna be okay. He's gonna go on to make movies. He's gonna be a big deal since it's Steven Spielberg. But I didn't really. Everything Everywhere All at Once is actually on my mind more than this. However, I still somehow gave this a 4 out of 5. I don't know how that happened, but that happened. So, thoughts on the Fabelmans, Drew Angel?
I really enjoyed The Fabelmans. I enjoyed it more than I thought. I went and saw it when after these Oscar nominations came out. It popped up for 2 showings in my local theater. I ran down there for the earliest showtime on a Tuesday, and I watched it, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's one of those movies that when I left the theater, I was feeling good, and I think that's what it was trying to get you to feel at the end of it. And I think that's what I liked about it, is that it was hopeful. It left off on a joke of swapping the horizons, because that's what that guy's Ford told him. And it reminded me of Belfast from last year, where it was like the little engine that could for me, because it was such a personal story. But when I was watching it, it was just so charming, and I just wanted it to win as much as it could. I don't think The Fabelmans is going to win Best Picture, but I think that this could have an opportunity to get Steven Spielberg directing, since it is a very personal story from his childhood, and he is a legacy. But I just really enjoyed this movie. I think I gave it a 5 actually on Letterboxd. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I left the theater feeling happy, and then being in getting to see this like a slice of life of how this kid grew up and everything. And I just thought everybody did really well. I thought the writing was done really well. The editing and the directing was done really well. It was one of those movies I agree with you that it didn't stick with me as much as I'm not sitting there up at 3 a.m. thinking of everything everywhere all at once and all the different realities and multiverses. I'm not doing that with The Fabelmans. But when I think back to it, it still has a positive memory in my mind. So I do think it could maybe win one or a couple awards. I just don't think it's going to take home the whole shebang here. Yeah.
Of things that do stick with me, it's little tricks that he figured out with his special effects. Again, there's no Photoshop. There's no laptop or multiple laptops he has to work with. Like, he has to figure this shit out. And if he fucks it up, that's the only copy of his film he has. So like, there's a scene where he's filmed a movie in the desert, cowboys and Indians or whatever it was, and he's got his friends shooting these little cap guns, and he's just like, this shit looks fake. How do I fix this? And he figured out just like putting a little pinhole in a couple of the frames, and it looks like the gunshot. And again, people in 1953 are like blown away by this. Like, how did you do that? You know, like, yeah, I found little things like that charming. You know, like again, they're in the desert because they're in Arizona at this point, and you know, you've only got you're only limited by your imagination when you film in the desert. But again, he's doing a war movie, and so like he needs to create an explosion as one of his childhood friends is running from it, and it's like, oh, we're gonna dig a little hole in the dirt in the ground, and I'm gonna put a board here. We're gonna put some dirt on that board, and then you step on it and fall forward, and that'll make it look like there's a big explosion. Like, oh, yeah, that's so fucking sick. Like, you can still use those tricks today now, and no one will because it's easier to just buy the $2 ADI file or whatever it's called. And
yeah, and then somebody forgets to like color correct it, and it looks cheesy as all heck. And then it gets on like gets on one of those like those YouTube videos that everybody talks about how trash this movie is because the CGI was garbage kind of thing.
Oh no. Best case scenario, worst case scenario. I'm not sure which one that is because people are still talking about your product, but they're not saying nice things about it. Speaking about products that people are talking about, but I don't think they have anything nice to say despite it being on this list. Tar, with a little umlaut over the A. It's about a female conductor played by Cate Blanchett. She's been up to no good, Drew Angelman. You know, they say that power corrupts men, but sometimes it corrupts women too. And guess what? Women like to take advantage of other women too, apparently. And that's what Tar is kind of about. It's very dry. It's very long. I think it's an American production, but it's very German and cold. And I didn't feel two things about this movie the entire time. I am on the edge of my seat. I'm like, but the entire time I was like, where is this going? I want to know what's happening here. Like, why is she freaking out about a sound from the refrigerator? Like, these little things I figure out on my own. But Tar, I don't know why it's even on this list. I saw a trailer for it for whatever movie I went to see. Only saw it one time. I'm like, that's going to be a movie I want to see in the theater. Would not get to the theater. But again, I always picture like it's all about it's a conductor. So it's all music and sound. Like, this would be a great movie to have seen in the movie house. I probably should have gave it a 2, but I gave it a 3. And while folks were talking about Cate Blanchett has taken the Best Actress Oscar, I literally think Michelle Yeoh is dominating her. But TBD on that in 48 hours. Drew, what did you think of Tar with an asterisk?
First time I watched it, / the only time I watched it. I don't know why I preferred it the first time I watched it. But
I was like, you saw this more than once?
I watched it once on Peacock, and it was like a Sunday morning. I saw it came to Peacock, and I was like, I want to watch this because I do remember seeing the trailer, and I was excited because it seemed eerie. It seemed, I don't know, a little bit more like a thriller drama. And I was thinking that it was going to be like a psychological thriller drama with the way she was kind of like Cate Blanchett's character seemed to be unhinged or going to an unhinged place, trying to finish out a giant project or something. That wasn't the case at all. I found that there's some marketing teams that decide to make the trailers different to what the movie is. And when watching the movie, I kept on wondering, when is it going to hit? You know, when is it going to get to the point where I'm just like completely engulfed in this movie and in the character? I just found it, I kept on keeping it at the topsoil for the whole thing. I thought Cate Blanchett did a great job. I just didn't think that there was a ton of meat compared to the runtime that this movie had. So at the end of the movie where we leave, to me, I felt like the whole ending was a joke. In a sense of like, look how esteemed she was. Now look where she's at. And that's where it can get you. The end. And I'm like, 2.5 hours for that. Um,
Well said. Yes.
uh, but as time has gone on and I've listened to other podcasts, I'm like, I guess that movie was well directed, and I thought Kate Blanchett
Mhm.
could do well. There's some people on a different podcast that was like really pushing that Tar could get Best Picture, but we talked about on our predictions podcast that sometimes the more likable choice or the more mass appeal choice is the better option, or the most likely to win. And I just don't think Tar. I think it's very divisive in a way of like either
Mhm.
you love it or you hate it. There is no like middle ground of like I thought it was fine, like I'd watch it again if it was just on,
Mhm.
no, I don't think that's this kind of movie. So I think Kate could maybe get there, and that could be one of the awards that it wins for sure. I don't think it has enough steam to win in the Best Picture, but then again, who knows? We'll see. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I keep saying this movie was very dry. It was like watching sandpaper, 2.5 hours of sandpaper, and it wasn't pleasurable. Like again, there are interesting scenes in it. Again, I'm on the edge of my seat. I want to know where this is going. It ultimately goes nowhere for me. We just end up in the Philippines. I'm like, all right, I guess if you have to end up somewhere. Um, but like she's given a lecture to some kids at whatever prestigious New York academy, and ends up offending one of them. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's different. So like, this is definitely like a generational thing as well. Like she came up in one era, and now people are like, Bach, you mean that guy who sired 20 illegitimate children? Like that guy stands, like that guy goes against everything I believe. And she's like, it was 300 years ago, man. Like the forget about the character. It's the art. It's the music. You should be appreciating that. Like no one to this day has still done anything he's done, and you should appreciate it. And it's like, fuck you, lady. Like this, it's a whole thing. So
yeah, it's kind
yeah.
of like when she's watching the VHS tapes, but then she's talking to the new student that wants to join the orchestra, and she's like, "Oh yeah, well I'm on YouTube. Like I have a video on YouTube that somebody did," and she's like having to be taught what YouTube is.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it definitely has that generational thing, and even talking to her like mentor or whoever it was, and he's like, "Oh well, if I was conducting back in the day when social media was around, I would be like making sure all my skeletons are out of the closet or whatever." And it's like,
Oh
okay, well, okay, we get it. Like we understand what you're going for here.
yeah.
It just takes a really long time to get there. It just takes a really long, arduous trudge through mud and snow, and
Hmm.
it takes a long time. And I think that's a major thing with it, to the point where halfway through you're like, what's going on here? Like, can we get to it? Let's go,
I'm
please.
glad you mentioned that line about the closet, because that was the I burst out laughing. That's the most emoting I did during that movie, was we was talking like, yeah, in my closet there are only suits. And I was like, oh, burn, bitch. Like we're in the middle of the tease here. This is a movie that I don't think should be on this list. However, it is my most enjoyable movie of the year. It is my favorite movie of the year. Is it the best movie? I don't know about all that, but it is my highest ranked movie of all movies on this list here, and that's Top Gun Maverick. I gave it 5 out of 5. I think I gave it like 7 out of 5 or 11 out of 5 or whatever it was when I did the first review. But for the sake of this conversation, 5 out of 5. I saw it 4 times in the theater. Can't tell you how many times I've watched it at home now. It never gets old. It's a basic story. There's no real enemy. It's internal conflicts. There's some nostalgia sprinkled in there, but it's all done just within the perfect doses. And in the end, you do walk away feeling like, oh man, like we could accomplish anything, dear Angelman. Like you and me, we could climb the highest peaks, and an eagle will just soar on our arm here, and nothing will stop us, buddy. And that's Top Gun Maverick for me. Um, I don't think it's gonna take Best Picture, but I'd be pleasantly surprised if it did. Um, Top Gun 2, what you say?
Incredible. Such a good movie. I think we talked about it in our best of 2022, and I saw it
Mm,
twice in theaters, both with family members. I would have saw it more times. I saw it in
nice.
Dolby. The It's just incredible. It is one of those movies where I would I loved it in theaters so much that I would see it over and over and over again. Luckily, I have a AMC A list, so I could like go to the movies 3 times a week, and I could watch it for just paying for that that subscription. It's on Paramount Plus. I haven't watched it on Paramount Plus just yet, but you nailed it on the head. I mean, it's just so enjoyable. It's an easy watch. It's nostalgia, but it's new. It talks about the old movie, but it's completely something different, but in the same way. There's no reason for this movie to be as good as it is.
Right.
This, I like you said, I don't think this movie could win Best Picture, but then again, I think times are changing, and I could see this kind of being like a Green Book or a Coda, where everybody's like, I like this movie, and it starts hitting into the twos, it hits into the top threes. You have all these other movies like hopping over each other. Everything Everywhere is good, but I could see where people are a little bit lower on it. And the same thing with Banshees, Tar, Elvis. I mean, some of those movies could like really, you could make a case for why it should be at the top or the bottom. Whereas I think Top Gun Maverick could have the most consistency where it places. I think the only thing that people would get on it is that it's not a traditional looking Oscar movie. Oscar movies aren't supposed to make this much money back in the day they used to, but nowadays it's not like it's more on art and everything. But this one was just loved by so many people. It would be super interesting if it were to take home the Oscar. And I do think that there is a way in a world that it possibly could, and completely sideline everybody and just completely shock everybody for taking it, kind of like a la Green Book or Coda in a way. So it'll be very interesting to see if it could. Even Jimmy Kimmel's Oscar like commercials are all about Top Gun Maverick. So I think it's such a good movie though. Like,
such a great movie. Like it's just the practical effects alone, like it's one of those things where like I want to see more behind the scenes featurettes on it, like maybe Clifton Powell isn't flying that plane, but he was in that plane and someone was flying it. And so when he's going upside down, he's like, Miles Teller is literally like trying to not vomit on the little GoPro that they squeezed into that cockpit. It's so much great in this movie that I shouldn't be surprised it's on this, but I'm just like, this thing was so commercial. This thing was so successful. This thing is so against everything the Academy has been for at least the last 25 years of our lifetime. Like it's weird that it's on here. Again, 5 out of 5 for me, but I do not see it winning. I'll be very surprised if it does win.
If it does, Miles Teller needs to like either get on stage and take off his suit and do the dance that he does on the beach in the movie, because that would be something wild. That'd be something wild if Top Gun Maverick won. Like I just talked about, like I just try to hype it up, being like, there's a chance, but it's such a slim chance in I think in all of our minds. But that would be so wild to the point where it's like everybody who is part of that movie, like the director, Tom Cruise, and Miles Teller, just take off your suit tops and start wiggling around like Miles Teller did on the beach. God,
this isn't Magic Mike XXL, Drew Angelman. How dare you?
It's The Last Dance.
It's The Last Dance. Outstanding. My friend, Brendan Fraser just won the Best Actor award. And as he's giving his speech, he's not in there in his whale costume. He's just Brendan Fraser. He's just as he is. But then all of a sudden, he unzips himself. And inside Brendan Fraser is a tiny little Men in Black alien who's been piloting this exoskeleton the entire time. And he tells us about how his people have been watching our people for millennia, and they feel like they're finally ready. They're in a good place. No more judgments. Everyone's trying to be better. We want to share technology with you. And then the crisis team comes in and shoots tiny alien in the head, thus setting off an intergalactic war that, well, we just don't survive. I'm sorry. Worst ending to the Oscars there could be, but that might be a thing the crisis team might want to watch out for.
The final Oscars.
The final Oscars. Triangle of Sadness. Woof. I saw the trailer for Triangle of Sadness once upon a time. I was like, this looks funny. This looks charming. Sure, it's conveying a message, but Woody Harrelson's in here. This has to be a good time, right? No. Triangle of Sadness is trying to convey a message. It's trying to say something. It's a whole thing about classism and upstairs, downstairs, and this and that. But when it finally actually gets to something interesting in its 2.5 hour runtime, then it ends. Again, this is the same. We've talked about this 2 other times now. It doesn't have an ending. It just ends. It makes you go like, I wonder what she did with that rock. You know what? They could have just showed us, and that would have been fine, or whatever. But this was not a good movie. This is about classism and the rich versus the poor versus the middle. The middle kind of just stays in the middle, but the rich and the poor have a violent shift. And like this is one of those worst case scenarios where captain's just drunk, picks the wrong day when we got the biggest storm this month coming up, and then once we do survive that, and did you feel as bad for that Russian lady as I did, where she's just covered head to toe in her own mess? Like all the bodily fluids in the world are on top of her, and they're all her own, and it's gross for the sake of being gross. But after she survives that, then pirates storm the ship, and then they end up on an island, and then we have another hour and a half to go. True Asian. I gave Triangle of Sadness a 2 out of 5. I think the lowest score I gave anything here, and again, woof.
I'm surprised you gave it that high, because I gave it half a star.
Half a star.
I hated this movie. I loathed this movie. Triangle of Sadness, more like Triangle of Badness. This stunk. I was actually looking to rent this movie earlier because it was one of the only Best Pictures I hadn't seen yet, and I didn't know when it was going to hit streaming services. I was very happy when I saw it was on Hulu, and I watched it Sunday. I watched it on the Sunday, and for 2.5 hours, first of all, I knew it was 2.5 hours, so I was getting myself ready. It was just so boring. It was pointless. Boring. It wasn't as funny as it could have been.
You don't like any of the characters.
I hated every single character, and like you said, when it finally gets to a point where it's actually interesting, and to me, the interesting part is somewhat of the ship. I think they showed too much of the ship, but if they were a little bit on the ship and then mostly on the island, that's a way more compelling story than everything that we saw leading up to them getting to the island. And then that was kind of breezed through in some areas. And I was like, that could have been such an interesting story to show the complete change of who was on top and who's on the bottom. But when the power shifts, the mindsets don't, to the point where, now I'm going to act as bad as these rich people were to me when I was working on the ship, and they're treating me like dirt. Now I'm going to treat them like dirt in a way that it's that was so interesting. That's such an interesting concept, but they masked it under this just layers and layers and layers of garbage and cringe and awkwardness between Carl and Yaya. And then it's just I don't care about any of these people. Half these people I don't even know the names to that are on this island. I don't care if they're eating pretzels. I don't care if they're murdering donkeys. Once the donkey was killed, I was saying they're on an island with other people. I don't know where they're at, but I'm sure if they just explore the island, they will find their way out of it. And they could have. They just sat on the beach and then slept in a safety boat for the longest time. And I was like, what are they doing all day? They just sit around, do nothing. It was pointless. To me, it was pointless. It reminded me of like the 13 other movies that were satirizing the 1% and had something to say about it. I watched The Menu. I was watching all these other movies. I think The Menu was much better, an hour and 42 minutes compared to this movie that was 2.5 hours that I thought was just like so boring. And I don't even think The Menu is that great of a film. I just think that this movie was kind of caught up in its own BS. That it was just like, it needs to be 2.5 hours. It has to be 2.5 hours because this is all so important. It's not. It's just not. And it just stunk. I hated it. I hated it so much. I will never watch it again. I'm glad I didn't spend any money for it.
It's one of those things where like I texted a friend of mine. I was like, "This is a best picture? What the fuck?" Like, and you hit the nail on the head, dude. Like, if you're gonna bring up The Menu, like comparing one against the other, like I also did not like The Menu. I didn't hate it as much as I hated Triangle of Sadness, but The Menu, oh my god, it's a breath of fresh air. It's like a warm pillow at night. Like you're just hugging that thing the entire time because it's what 100 minutes. It's like 100 minutes, and the characters are at least a lot better. What they're saying is a lot clearer, and just it doesn't drag. It's like we just got to melt all you guys like s'mores. Sorry, that's how we end this movie. Anya Taylor-Joy, have a cheeseburger. It's fine. But
Triangle. Can I just say I love that ending, by the way. With everybody being s'mores, I love that ending.
Like, did you understand that? Because I didn't. I was just like, what is happening? This is ridiculous. Like they're literally wearing a vest of marshmallows and they just stand there. At some point they just I guess we're a piece of shit. We're all pieces of shit and we just need to die. Like I wasn't feeling the ending at all. But if you got a minute, you mind explaining it to laymen like me?
No, I don't know the real ending to it. I just like that they all turned into s'mores and then they were all just deciding to do their fate. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of The Menu. I think I gave it like 2.5, almost 2 stars on Letterboxd. I thought it was a decent watch, like at 100 minutes. I just, at the certain point, which was the captain and the Russian guy talking and going over quotes, and then everybody like puking and like, first of all, the quotes one was like too on the nose. Like when they were going over the quotes of I was like, I get it. I get it. One person is a socialist. The other one is a capitalist. I understand that you're going back and forth with this rhetoric. I get it. I get it. You're saying different things, but you're kind of saying the same thing. I get it. But they kept on going it over and over and over again. And then in the middle of people like pooping on themselves, the toilets overflowing, everybody like just puking all over the place. That was the point where I was like, this is the best picture. Like, are you like, could we not have left that 10th spot open or changed it to something else? Like, honestly, like this surpassed like Till, this surpassed the Woman King, this surpassed freaking Devotion. Even I was shocked. I was watching this movie. I was like, I hate this. I don't know why I'm subjecting myself to this. And I can't believe this is Best Picture. I honestly hate this movie. This is probably my least favorite movie I've watched this year by far.
Do you think what I got out of this movie is rich people like being talked down to? No one else is doing it. But when someone does point their finger at them and say, you're a piece of shit. How dare you be successful and blah, 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 blah. Like, oh, thank you. I needed to hear that. Oh, look at me. I'm sure I flew in some Nutella, but I guess I am a bad person. You think that's where they're going to, like, there's some sort of like sadist relationship with this movie and the wealthy?
I guess so. I watched a YouTube video talking about all the 1% movies like The Glass Onion and The Menu and Triangle Sadness and a few others. And there was a point that I thought was really, really a point that they brought up is that with these like big budget movies, and I don't know, it's Neon, so it's probably not super budget, but like there's still millions of dollars being pumped into these movies via a investors and backers and these rich people that these movies are kind of taking quote unquote shots at, but they never go like, I think it feels hollow at certain points because it doesn't feel like they go all the way. And it's because of the investment backers. Like the bankers and all these people that are investing in these projects wouldn't invest if they're like going to be made fun of in a certain way. So they have to like change it up in a certain way and be something different, to the point where I think at the end of the day, it leaves some of these movies feeling a bit hollow in their phrasing or in their theme or in what they're trying to portray out to everybody in these movies or into the audiences, to the point where I think that's where this movie really falls flat, in not only how beefed up the runtime is and how useless a lot of these scenes are, but the message just completely kind of gets sidelined or completely gets washed away because of all the other stuff that it gets layered and layered and layered on. And it's just not concise in any way. Like, there's no reason for this movie to be 2.5 hours. It's not even about the runtime. Like, I don't even care because I wasn't doing anything on Sunday. It's the point of what the message they were trying to get across gets lost in the 2.5 hours because they add so much garbage on this. Like, Carl being jealous of everything and wanting to split everything 50-50 with his girlfriend at the end of the day, to me, is just completely useless by the time we get to the yacht and then the island. Like, it's completely useless in that way. Like, that was just, it was like 15 minutes of just nothing.
That table scene where they're talking about the check too at the beginning of the film, that thing drags on forever, and it's supposed to feel awkward, but you're just like, oh my god, just and there's several times where the character himself is just like, you know what, don't worry about it, I'm just gonna take care, and it just drags on further. Like, it won't show itself mercy. It's like, oh my, no, we just bail out of the movie, dude, bail out. You brought up Till, and the first act of that movie, I think, is one of the scariest movies of all year, maybe even all time. And that's, picture it, dude. You're in a town that isn't your own, and all of a sudden, men break into the room, abduct you in the night, and they're gonna implement their own system of justice upon you, all for the crime of whistling out another woman that doesn't look anything like you, Drew Angelman. And I should hope that woman doesn't look anything like you, because your beard only works on you and not her. However, Till, I don't think, was the best movie. I think Danielle Delweiler was snubbed for a Best Actress nominee. But now we get into our final movie here, and that's Women Talking. And we don't really see anything horrific, but we always see the aftermath of horrific. And I think this is right up there with one of the scariest movies maybe of all time. Like, this is a movie about, there's a colony. I don't know if they're Amish, but they've got some sort of religious secular thing where they're very enclosed. Nothing happens outside of the colony. Everything happens within the colony. And it's just so backwards and wrong, and just, there's a lot of evil on this land here. And what's happening is the women of Women Talking on their colony are repeatedly being raped by the men of their village or colony or whatever. And everybody seems to be hiding behind religion. And it's just like, I only know 3 things in life. I know farming, I know Jesus, and I know raping my sister. And you're just like, Jesus Christ. Like, no one ever gets to make that speech, thankfully, but that's the essence of what happened in this movie. And eventually 2 dudes get caught for raping a teenager, not even a teenager, younger than a teenager. And when not Sarah Polly, I think it's Claire Foy, drives a sickle into this one dude's chest, I'm like, yeah. But then, like, oh, we got to protect these men from these crazy ass women, so we're going to take them into town. But then every man in this village, this colony, is going to walk into town and post his bail. And holy shit, what is happening here? There's so much wrong happening, and it's because of the environment. You're like, while this is not a true story and is actually based on quote unquote true events, this movie, it's crazy. This movie takes place in 2010. It could take place in 1910. It could take place in 1950. But the point is, something like this is still happening today. and it's wildly scary. Women Talking, the last movie I saw of these 10, not my favorite, but I also gave it a 4 out of 5. I don't know if there are any really standout actresses in this. The story and the way it was directed and how it's told, and Sarah Polley should have actually been nominated for a director spot. This movie was fucking crazy, dude, and it delivers what it promises. Women Talking, but Drew Angelman, what did you think of Women Talking?
I'll be honest, going into the movie, didn't know what this movie was about. I
Same,
didn't have any
same,
clue. I didn't see a trailer. I just knew it was
same.
nominated. Right when I saw it was nominated and we were going to talk about all these movies, I looked up when it was going to be coming back to the AMC. There was one spot open on a Tuesday. I went there and yeah, this was a heavy movie. They talk
Yeah,
about a
right.
lot of heavy subjects, but this was shocking. My jaw hit the floor a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that the way this movie is shot, edited,
Mm-hmm.
filmed, I just love a movie that is close, kind of close together, and it's just letting actors act. And I thought
Okay.
that this movie was perfect in that way. They have an incredible range of actresses just performing the hell out of this story, and it's incredible. I think the way that the story is developed during this time was very interesting, that it just didn't do like this whole like, I don't know. It wasn't just a whole like exposition dump in the first 10 minutes. It kind of slowly pieces you in. And then throughout the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, you kind of figure out everything as it goes along. And it doesn't overboard you with a whole bunch of information. It develops it over a certain amount of time. And I just thought it was really, really well done. I love what the director did. I love the process that they did because I watched the director's roundtable with Sarah Pauly, and
Okay.
her process on set was really, really awesome. I thought it was really, really incredible. Everybody enjoyed working with her, and I do think that she should have gotten a best director's nom. I will agree that this wasn't my favorite movie, but is a movie that stuck with me. And I kind of feel bad that this movie isn't getting as much talk as like say Elvis or some of the other movies that are up for best picture, because I do think that this could be somewhat of an important movie to some to watch and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I thought it was really, really well done. I too, I think gave it 4 stars. I really did enjoy this film, even though it wasn't my favorite out of this. But I would rank it up. I think in the top 4 of these movies, of the
Mm-hmm.
best picture movies that I did see. I think I would put it in the top 4 of movies that I watched of the best picture. But yeah, I just don't think it has enough like. I just don't think it has enough oomph to overcome the hurdle of some of these other movies that are getting a lot more talk and a lot more press. But I did think that this was a pretty good movie, and kind of like when I was leaving it, surprised that it wasn't getting more recognition or talking, or people were talking about it, because this
It,
kind of fits the mold of Oscar movies, in my opinion. Sorry.
oh, sure. No, no, don't be sorry, man. Like you're right, dude. This fills that one slot. Like so, theme with the Oscars. Every year we get a war movie. Every year we get a movie
Mhm.
about someone who's being oppressed, a minority being oppressed. Every year we get a thing about the us versus them. Every year we get lately we get a biopic, a musical biopic. We get a wacky film, and then we get a thing about women. Women are being wronged. That's been consistent for at least the last 5 years here. And again, much like what you were saying, like I never saw a trailer for Women Talking. I didn't know it existed. I want to say I saw an ad on Facebook that the Regal is like Women Talking now playing at your local cinema, your local Regal. And when I saw it, I don't think I saw recognized it as a Regal ad. I thought it was like an Onion article because it was like it's just a cash shot of 10 women, and it said Women Talking. I was like, that's clearly an Onion article about just the best picture. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, man. There's a lot of dark shit happening in this where you're like, really, your 4-year-old daughter is being raped on a regular basis here. This is not okay. Like I don't want to live in a world where this is happening here. You know, one of the first 2 minutes of the film is a young woman wakes up. She's got bruises on her thighs. There's some blood, and she's like, "It happened again." And you're like, "Happened again? Oh my god! Like this is a regular thing?" No, it's bueno. Like, and hats off again to Sarah Polly. Like, we never get to meet the antagonists. We never get to meet the men that are accused of these crimes. And again, they're from your neighbor to your brother to your own fucking father. Like, we never see any face. No one gets to make that monologue of like what I made a joke about at the beginning of this segment. Like, I only know three things. No one, Brad Pitt doesn't get to make that speech. It's literally just like, there are monsters among us and we need to take care of it. And we need to figure out a way to get away from them or whatever. Speaking of Brad Pitt, he EP'd this, and I think he's quietly becoming one of the best producers in Hollywood here. He produced Minari. He produced, I want to say, 12 Years a Slave. Like, Brad Pitt has consecutively had, over the past decade, like a Best Picture nomination every year that you wouldn't even know about.
No, I didn't know that at all. And he's making a small renaissance back into the movie scene. You know who he's kind of reminded me of? It's kind of like he's getting like the Ryan Reynolds or the John Wick, Keanu Reeves kind of renaissance in a way that he went away for quite a while. I mean, he is getting a divorce. He is in a new relationship, but he kind of went away for a little bit. Took some time away from being a big actor kind of scene, and then he's just been in a lot of things recently. And then hearing that he's been putting himself into executive producing lines, I just think that he is hitting another stride in his career, and he looks absolutely incredible. But I mean, I know Babylon he was in Bullet Train. I know he did a couple of other cameos and spots here, and it just seems like everything that he's in, everybody's just like excited to see him. And hearing that he's doing like more behind the scenes stuff as well. Yeah, he's just doing a lot of big work. I didn't know he was even executive producing this movie, but that's pretty incredible.
He's a bad motherfucker. So dig this. This is the last year, 2022. So he EP'd She Said. That was the movie about Harvey Weinstein getting arrested. He did Blonde, Women Talking, which we're talking about now, Paper Girls, and then apparently he's a part of the remake of Father of the Bride, as well as something, 8 episodes of something called Outer Range. I don't know what that is. But then, like, let me see, Minari in 2020, Ad Astra, which looked pretty, but oh really, he did The Last Black Man in San Francisco, which gave us Jonathan Majors. Vice, If Beale Street Could Talk, which actually should have been the best picture of 2018, wasn't even nominated. Damn, like, Brad Pitt, you were a bad motherfucker. Moonlight, he did Moonlight. Selma,
wow.
Fury, like, Brad Pitt is, again, 12 Years a Slave. Here's what happened with 12 Years a Slave. This is where he got hit. So he was a producer on 12 Years a Slave. He also had a very, very small part in it. But then foreign cinema was like, well, Brad Pitt's in this movie. Why wouldn't we put him on the poster? So if you're like in Canada, it looks like Brad Pitt's been a slave for 12 years. No. If you're in Japan, it looks like Brad Pitt's the hero of 12 Years a Slave. Also, no. So he got a lot of weird publicity. He was like, oh, that should never have happened. So now he's been just in the background. Like, he doesn't do any press for this stuff. He's just like, just here's a check, make sure my name's on the picture, but deep in the picture, like third title card. No, don't put me up front and center, because no one else knows this shit.
Oh, anyway. And speaking of in the background, I mean, he was in that Paradise City. What was it called? The one with Sandra Bullock and Channing Tatum. Yes. He had a small cameo in that one as well, and he was the best part of that movie, to the point where people were like, I love Brad Pitt in that movie. That other movie, the rest of the movie stunk. And I don't blame them for saying that. But yeah, I think he's just having this slow renaissance coming back, and he's just super personable, and hearing that he's executive producing like a lot of really incredible movies is really outstanding, because I had no idea that he executive produced a majority of the movies that you mentioned. I just was going through Letterboxd of all the 2019 movies that I watched, and I remember watching The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and I loved that movie. That movie was absolutely incredible.
Drew Angelman, CEO of Angelcake Entertainment. We just went over all 10 best pictures here. Who do you think's walking home with the trophy in 48 hours?
I am hoping and saying out loud, trying to make it come to fruition, that Everything Everywhere All at Once wins Best Picture at the 2023 or the 95th Oscars. If not Everything Everywhere All at Once, then I'm thinking it could be The Banshees of Inisherin. But then my personal favorite would be Top Gun Maverick, just to see everybody be like, what? How? What? That would be absolutely incredible.
That would be a floor rocker for sure. Again, I'm with you. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is going to take Best Picture. Again, my favorite of all these 10 is Top Gun 2. I don't necessarily know that it'll make it, but I can also see the Fablemans taking this because of just it's Spielberg.
I can see that.
Yeah.
And
then it would just make James Cameron so mad. He'd be like, "Oh, Spielberg! Oh." Anyway.
If and when we get to Avatar 5 and James Cameron says he's going to wrap it up, I think that's when they'll finally give him the Oscar for Avatar series. I think just because it's like a huge world made, that that's when they'll be like, you know what? Fine. You can get the Oscar this time, but we're not going to give it to you for 1, 2, 3, or 4. And only if he's ending on 5, but he probably isn't. He's going to make like 9 of them.
Yeah, I definitely don't see Avatar 2 taking this, but pretty movie. Anyways, Drew Angel, is there anything you want to plug, sir?
Just plug in my YouTube channel at youtube.com/angelcakevids, where I talk about reality TV, mainly The Challenge, which is going to be having a new season happening very, very soon. So I'm very excited to be covering it and having a good time.
That's what's up. Folks, I do a couple things around here. Lately, we do the Waffle Box podcast, the original Waffle Box. You accept no substitutes because it is the best part of Wednesdays. You, me, and friend of the family, Mike Fish, we talk about everything and nothing all at the same time. We just spoke about Creed Part 3 this last Waffle Box episode 88. And yeah, man, it's the first time a Creed film can stand on its own. So, good movie. It's a better podcast. You will love all of it. So, for Drew Angelman, I've been Kush Hayes. You've been you.
Microdose, 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 yeah, microdose.
From the Bosnet family.
Triangle Sadness, more like Triangle of Badness.